I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Alejandro Lemus, who is our horticultural educator at Santa Barbara Botanic Garden. He has an infectious enthusiasm for native plants that he shares via a variety of classes, workshops, and social media posts. He's done some really fun Instagram videos if you're on Instagram. And I think that Alejandro found the right job because he likes to garden with native plants in his free time, in addition to teaching us all how to do it at work. And he also likes to observe the insects that visit native plants. He has a gift for sharing his expertise in a way that I find welcoming and approachable, and it's demonstrated by his motto, which is that you're not a gardener if you haven't killed at least one plant, or maybe a dozen.
I just want to take it off, if that's okay. I'm just going to take off the microphone, just like Doug did. I'm sorry, I don't know you, Mr. Talamy. So thank you so much for having me here today. It's been an exciting morning just hearing about the power of native plants and all the beautiful benefits that they provide. In fact, I'm so inspired. I want to go home right now and plant a native plant, but I can't because I'm here to talk to you about why you should plant native plants. So again, I'm Alejandro Lemus, horticultural educator at Santa Barbara Botanic Garden, and my presentation is about how we can grow resilience, how habitat gardening can help wildlife and communities. So I want to encourage all of us to think about our backyards, our front yards, parking strips, curb strips, whatever you call them. I call them hell strips, your container gardens, your raised beds with herbs and veggies. And I want you to start to think about how those pocket spaces can help cultivate biodiversity and ultimately cultivate resilience. Because I know resilience is one thing we need yesterday, today, and going forward. How do I switch my slide? There we go. Oh, that's not me. There we go, that is me. So before I go any further, I just want to remind people of the definition of community ecology. So in ecology, a community is a group or association of populations of two or more different species occupying the same geographical area at the same time, also known as a biological community. So to me, if I had to show you a picture to sum that up, this is that picture, where you see humans and plants in conversation. I think oftentimes we, as humans, exclude ourselves from the natural environment, when in reality, we are actually super interlinked, right? We are part of the insects, we are part of the reptiles, we are part of the larger mammals. And the sooner we realize that, the more we can live harmoniously with our native plants. So I want to provide you with a couple stories that you could potentially share with your friends, your families, your neighbors as to why planting native plants are important. And as we've been learning today, one of those stories involves the insects. We've heard a lot about insects and why they're important. Insects represent half of Earth's biodiversity. That is insane. And in fact, 25 to 35% of those insects are herbivorous, meaning that they primarily feed on plants. You know, just take a look at this gray hair streak that's feeding on a buckwheat species. I think every habitat garden needs a species of buckwheat. Take a look at the native bees that utilize manzanita flowers, all sorts of cool insects that are reliant on plants. So if you take anything from today, it's that plants and insects are quite literally feeding the web of life. Oops. Got to go that way. So at the Botanic Garden, we have a couple of educational principles and narratives, and I hope that you can share these with your friends, your family, your neighborhoods after today. But we like to say that native plants support the web of life. In fact, almost all songbirds are going to feed their young insects. How do you attract those insects? You have to attract them with the plants. You know, we've been hearing about how plants are going to attract caterpillars, insects that are going to feed the web of life. So in fact, over 50% of the diet of many birds is Lepidoptera species. Butterflies, moths, caterpillars, what are the ways you attract them? You have to plant the milkweed plants if you want to see monarch butterflies. So really start to think about what insects you want to attract and what plants you have to plant for that to happen. I'm going up. Yes. So perhaps you have a friend who's not into insects. That's not the way to talk to them. I don't think you should be their friend. But perhaps that person's more of an aesthetic. They want to talk about, you know, the beauty of native plants. This might be another way to buy them into the narrative. Native plants provide us with a sense of place and they're beautiful. And to me, I really like this value here. It could be a field of California poppies, similar to what you see at the Botanic Garden in the springtime. It could be the feeling you get when you're underneath the redwood trees at the garden. It could be the smells of sages waving from the chaparral and the coastal sage scrub communities. All of those are valid reasons to plant native plants. And one common theme I want to go back to today is that native plants make our communities much more resilient. And I don't want to continue to belabor these points, but I will. Native plants support native biodiversity, as we've been learning about today. They help save water if you're choosing the drought-adapted species after they're established. They're great for erosion control, stabilizing slopes. They combat urban heat islands. And as we've been hearing about with the Elinks Park project, they're incredible for climate-forward land planning. So go native plants. And they're also really great for wildfire adaptations, which we've been hearing is devastating and they're happening a lot more frequently. But if there's one thing that brings me peace and solace is that native plants in the landscape has regenerative wisdom that we can always rely on. So to me, that is a lesson that I've learned from the plants and about how they can teach us to be much more resilient. Okay, I figured this out. I have to go up. So I want a call to action here. So native plants are under threat and they need your protection. Approximately 2,000 of California's native plant taxa are endemic, meaning they're found nowhere else on Earth. That is crazy. Places like the Channel Islands are home to rare and endemic plants that you can't find anywhere else. But I want to call to action, and I want y'all to start to think about how your gardens, your front yards, your backyards can be an oasis for these plants. I think oftentimes we think about horticulture, conservation, gardening to be separate things from each other, but that's not really true. Habitat gardening is conservation. When you choose to plant that rare Dudleya species in a pot in your balcony, that is a powerful act of conservation. When you choose to plant that ethically sourced white sage, that is a powerful act of conservation. So those are steps that we can take to start to build biodiversity and resilience. So as a hotspot for biodiversity, what we do in California really matters. Just take a look at this map here. We have all sorts of things happening. See, I'm gonna walk around. I have to wave my hands, I need to walk around, but take a look at what's happening here. There's so many endemic species that you find on the West Coast. So for that reason, what we do in California really matters. And all of these endemic species are under threat and they need protection. How can we protect them? We can start to see how our front yards can cultivate native plants. So at the Botanic Garden, we have this vision of seeing 30% native plants in the places where we live, where we work, and where we play. And I think this idea of 30% native plants is something that's brought me a lot of peace, because when you think about replacing your entire lawn, sure, it would be great to do 100% native plants, but you don't have to do that. It can be 30% native plants. And I hope that's something that we can all take tangible actions to work towards. You know, 30% native plants can look different to everyone. 30% native plants, I'm gonna switch my arm here. 30% native plants could be this patch of hummingbird sage at Alice Keck Park Memorial Garden. I hope you visit after today. I'm gonna talk a little bit about what we've been doing at Alice Keck. 30% could be a Dudley in a pot. 30% could be this beautiful patch of Verbena de la Minas that are blooming outside of the Goleta Water District on Hollister. 30% native plants could be this beautiful buckwheat in my backyard that brings me so much peace. So I encourage you to think about what are ways you can start to think about 30% native plants. So I hope you're bought into native plants, because now I really want to talk about who are the folks who are planting these plants. How are we making a difference? So one thing I like to say is that as native plants build resilience, as they build habitat, native plants are also cultivating a community. So I want you to think about who are the folks planting these plants. I mean, here we have an image of talented landscapers. These are actually staff members from City of Port Hueneme down in Oxnard who actually helped plant over 150 native plants at Alice Keck Park Memorial Garden as part of the Botanic Garden's landscape transformation project there to install plants that are going to be super, super essential to Lepidoptera species. I have more images here of that happening. But seriously, I really want to encourage you to think about when we plant native plants, what are we doing? We're cultivating biodiversity, but you're also cultivating a group of talented landscapers. You know, here we have representatives from the city of Santa Barbara demonstrating how to plant, how to amend the soil. Here we have some folks from a local landscaping company in town, Enviroscaping, showcasing how to prune native plants. Why do we leave the browns? Why do we leave the tans? What is the habitat value of the muted landscape? So there's so many reasons we plant native plants, and one thing I've learned through my work at Santa Barbara Botanic Garden is that we're also cultivating a community of advocates that are going to further the native plant movement. I really like this picture here. I don't know who's watering those plants, but I'm sure they're super talented and know what they're doing. But this is an example, or this is an image of what Alice Keck Park, the native plant bed, looked like in November 2024 when we installed about 80 hummingbird sage plants. And so I like to say that the first year native plants will sleep, the second year native plants will creep, and then the third year they leave. But this happened after a year. They broke my rule, so I need to come up with a new rule. But this is what 30% native plants can look like. It could be this assemblage of hummingbird sage, deer grass in the background. Having these kinds of landscapes in the built environment and in our parks is totally possible. So I hope this is encouraging you to plant native plants. So I want to take a moment to recognize a really special group of people. I've been talking a lot about how native plants cultivate community. So native plants, they build habitat in a community of stewards. So as you've been hearing, the Botanic Garden, over the last few years, we've been offering the California Native Plant Landscaper certification, which I see many familiar faces from that certification in this room today. But for the first time ever last year, we were able to offer this program in Spanish to support 14 amazing community members, landscapers who work in their own business or work for local parks here in town like Elings Park. So these are the 14 graduates that received their certification last September. Yes, shout out to them, shout out. And I also want to take a moment to say that it's really the Spanish-speaking landscaping community that's pushing the native plant movement forward, and it's really our job to protect and uplift them with everything that's going on in the world today. So I'm really, really proud of what they've done. So I just want to show you some pictures of what we've been able to do. Again, I'm just sharing a story here with you. Sorry for the lack of words. But this is our last class for the Spanish Landscaper certification when we all met at Santa Barbara Botanic Garden to practice pruning, distribute the certificates because everyone met the requirements. But one thing that kept coming to me was that this was just a celebration of folks having fun and celebrating how plants have had an impact in our lives. Let it be something we're doing as a hobby, something we do for work. We're all connected by plants. And truly, these folks blew me away. I'm so humbled by them. On the last day I said, don't worry, the Botanic Garden will provide food. Alejandro has a $100 budget. Don't worry, don't worry. And all I had to say was that. And these folks showed up with pots of tamales, desserts, all sorts of food that I was not anticipating. So it was just a really great reminder of that native plants brought us here together and that we're all really unified by plants and we can all participate in the native plant movement. And again, just more pictures of our adventures. Here we are at Alice Keck Park, installing some native yarrow plants in between some of the other plants. But again, I just want to show you these pictures because it's a really great example of how we were having open and honest conversations about horticulture and gardening. These folks that otherwise maybe don't have a lot of say in their jobs because they're reporting to a supervisor, they have work to do. This is an opportunity for them to say, hey, Alejandro, let's lay out the plants this way. Or this is an opportunity for someone else like Renee to say, I don't like how they're laid out. Why don't we do it this way? So I really like that it was an open and honest conversation for really talking horticulture and the different ways we can approach horticulture and giving folks the platform to share that with other like-minded students. I don't have much to say about this picture other than the Elings Park landscaping staff are badass. Look at those folks. We have Renee pruning some California buckwheat and showcasing to our class, this is how you prune buckwheat. But this is also maybe why you want to save some of the flowers and the seeds because they're feeding wildlife. So this is just a really great example of how native plants are beautiful, but also how dormancy in native plants is beautiful and how we have to start to appreciate the muted colors of the landscape. The browns, the tans, the blacks, they're all beneficial to wildlife. So I want to pivot a little bit and I want to highlight a person that is so special and has brought me so much community here in Santa Barbara. But we talk about cultivating a community of advocates and landscapers. And I just want to say shout out to Liz Barnett, who is in the room today. Hi, Liz. I'm not as nervous because you're here. But I want to say shout out to Liz Barnett, who is Santa Barbara resident. They're a graduate of the California Native Plant Landscaper Certificate Program. They are president of their HOA, retired principal, and they are really taking the lead on their landscaping in their HOA community. Here they are. I love this picture of you, Liz. Look at you next to your Pozo Blue Sage. That is so adorable. I took that picture, by the way. But I just want to say shout out to Liz, who's making a difference. You can read about it in the article I wrote here. But truly, Liz is utilizing different ways to harvest rainwater in their community, are adding native plants, and are really making a difference in areas that otherwise feel that it's hard to make a difference sometimes. HOAs and getting people to change that mindset. I'm really happy to have met someone like you. And again, I'm happy to know someone like you, Liz, so thanks. Aw, thank you. So I also just want to conclude my presentation by encouraging you all to grow native plants. You know, I think we're starting to see that this demand for native plants is becoming really high, but the supply isn't quite there. So I want to encourage you to start to think about what are ways that you can utilize your garden to grow native plants, collect cuttings, collect seeds, and make it available for your community. So if you have visited the Botanic Garden recently, and specifically our backcountry area, you might notice this cage of plants and you're wondering, what is going on down here? This is my, I guess, laboratory where I get up to all my experiments, and when I want to leave my desk, this is where I go hang out. But we are growing native plants in the backcountry for the community. But what I really love about our project, this is our nano nursery, but we're growing native plants with the community. So we're showcasing summer camp participants, the beauty of horticulture, how to grow native plants. We're working with participants of our Pathfinders program. But so again, we really are working to engage the community. So after today, I encourage you to pick up a native plant or two. We have grown some lemonade berry or poppy. You have a choice for you. And I want to say I grew them, but that's not true. We grew them at the nano nursery. We all grew those plants. So I encourage you to take one home today. So just some really great pictures of seedlings and, you know, all the native plants we're growing. It's awesome. It's something that you all can participate in. It's fun. And if you have questions, feel free to find me in the nano nursery. I'm there like 70% of the time, hiding from my responsibilities. So I don't know if I'm at a time limit or anything I've lost. Oh, it's okay. Well, I'm done anyways. So I just want to say, let's get growing. And it starts with us. Thank you. That was amazing. Okay, I did that. So are there any questions? And they better be good questions. No, I'm just kidding. Any questions? It's also bright, so I have a hard time seeing. You in the back, yes.
Do you have any guidance on planting buckwheat or coyote bush, for example, in places where neighborhoods might be worried about fire?
Yeah, so the question is, yes, I have to remember to repeat the question. The question is, do we have any guidance for planting coyote brush or California buckwheat in high fire areas? So as Steve mentioned, the Botanic Garden is working towards developing resources for landscaping for wildfire resilience. If anyone's going to be at the CMPS conference next week, there's a really great workshop that's being offered about landscaping for wildfire resilience. But there are protocols. It all comes down to maintenance. And I can talk with you after today if you want to continue speaking. But I think maintenance is going to be a huge key when it comes to landscaping for wildfire resilience, making sure that you're cleaning out dead material, making sure the plants are being maintained, but also spacing, I'm learning, is a huge, huge consideration. California buckwheat, wonderful habitat plant, maybe not the best plant to have right by your window. So think about spacing. I've learned that spacing is a huge thing. We've also been working closely with the Santa Barbara County Fire Safe Council. So those are folks that may have other resources as well. Great question. Yeah. You, hi.
I wonder about like how much plant make an impact. Like one plant versus a herd, if you put a grouping of the same kind of plant, and that has an impact with the insects. What do you think?
I have many thoughts there. I think if everyone in this room, I have to repeat the question. Oh gosh, what was your question? So the question is, should I plant one plant or should we do block plantings, and is there a major difference? I hope that was your question because I'm going to answer that. But the answer is yes. If everyone planted a native plant in this room, that would be awesome, and my heart would be so content. But if everyone plants a mass planting of California buckwheat or other flowering perennials, that would be awesome. In terms of landscape design and thoughtfully designing for wildlife, I'm starting to learn that instead of just doing one-off species, start to consider block planting or mass planting. You know, definitely encourage you to also visit Alice Keck Park here in town to get some inspiration, but we've utilized hopefully a lot of the design principles there, block planting a lot of hummingbird sage, California buckwheat, and really playing with heights of plants. I think one thing we've also learned about today is structure. The three-dimensional structure is also going to be super, super vital for habitat and attracting caterpillars. So block planting and also thinking about 3D structure. And do I have time for one more question? Okay, one more question. Yes.
You follow an algorithm for the keystone plants. So if you have the Alice Kidd Park as a project, do you follow, have you structured an algorithm for a keystone?
Yeah, so the question is, do we have an algorithm for deciding keystone species or important plants? Is that what I'm understanding? Yeah, so we do try to adhere to this idea of planting keystone plants. So like one thing I've learned from Mr. Talamy's books is that plants like prunus, willows, quercus, oak trees are going to be super important. So we've definitely have made sure, I think at Alicekeck Park, that we have some height restrictions where we don't want the plants to get really tall there. But we definitely have added plants like toyon that are going to be great shrubs that are going to support caterpillars, butterflies, and birds. So we have made sure to include some larger shrubs, but there's always room for improvement there. Yeah. All right, I think those are all the questions I can take. Thank you.